Welcome to the Portico Podcast. This is Rewriting the North, a celebration of place and writing in the north of England.
Hey yo, my name is Testament. I am a hip-hop artist, I'm a rapper, and I'm also a writer. But today, here I stand in St. Stephen's Gardens, on St. Stephen's Street in Salford, on a cold autumnal day in the north of England. So the reason I'm in Salford today is to share what I've been finding out about this poet from the Victorian times, Robert Rose, a mixed race writer like me, but I'm in 2021 and he's in 1849. But one of the things that's special for me when I found out about Robert Rose was that he was known as the Bard of Colour. That's the title he gave himself. So he probably would look similar to me. He was mixed race, dual heritage. I am half Ghanaian, half English, but Robert Rose was half Guyanese and English. It's kind of a thrill because I've been looking at his poetry and his work and studying his life for the last 2 years or so, and now I'm literally on St. Stephen's Street, yards away from where he would have lived. And St. Stephen's Gardens, this would have been a graveyard for St. Stephen's Church, which is no longer here. I'm going to be taking you on a journey from St. Stephen's Street in Salford, where he once lived, down the road, across the River Irwell, into the city of Manchester, a journey that he would have taken, and on the way, sharing his story. Now let's walk. Robert Rose's story really speaks to me because he's someone who's not native to Manchester, but moved here from another city and became part of the furniture of Manchester life and cultural life. I've also moved from another city to here as well. He was a person of colour. His father was white and his mum was black, and my father's white and my mum's black. He wrestled with words. He wrestled with writer's block, which I definitely do as a writer. So Robert Rose, we don't have much information on when he was born, but we know that he was born in what they did call Berbice, which we now call Guyana. He was born to a West Indian merchant, some English white dude, probably from the north of England by his associations. We're not quite sure who he was. It's a mystery, who made a ton of money out of the plantations. Robert doesn't really talk about his father at all. He talks a lot about his sisters who he loved and misses, and he talks about his mum, who we take to be a slave or a person of colour, or certainly someone who didn't have the hierarchical status of his dad. And then he was sent as a boy to go and get educated in England. And we know that he went to a private school in Northumberland. It seems like his dad wasn't really involved. So once he moved to England, it was a benefactor who was a friend of his father's who kind of looked after him. So he kind of had a patron who would give him an allowance of £300 a year, which was a ton of money at that time, so he could live wealthy. And he was a bit of a rebel. He would get involved in boxing matches. He got in trouble for assaulting police officers. He was a bit of a troublemaker and a bit of a party animal. According to one of the newspaper articles on Robert Rose's death, they mentioned that his benefactor was a Liverpool MP. Now, all the Liverpool MPs of that period were all very much, let's keep slaves, we want this free workforce. So he definitely seems to have a political collision with his benefactor and probably his own father. So the turning point which sort of moved him from Liverpool to Manchester was when he attended a banquet in honour of Lord Brougham. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but he was someone who had campaigned against slavery, and all the great and the good in Liverpool came to this banquet. Robert Rose decides to get up and gives his speech, applauding Lord Brougham for his work in the House of Commons. It gets put in the newspapers that Robert Rose, this young poet, has got up to give this speech in praise of Brougham's efforts, and his patron didn't like that at all. And by the end of that year, Robert Rose had actually written a poem And this poem was a rallying cry to stop slavery all over the world, to go further. Reform by Robert Rose, the Bard of Colour. Ah, who can witness what our chiefs have done without confiding in what yet will be? 'Tis freedom tells her battles will be won, and nations cry aloud, we will be free. For souls like thine now aid our glorious cause, and baffle the dark arts of wily foes. We are not slow, for on our side the laws and reason prove our strength will hurl down those who proudly stand in selfishness apart, and turn deaf ears to misery's plaintive tale. But thousands, millions, now indignant start, driving them onward as the rushing gale sweeps the vile dust along. Strike with despair the loathsome monster, writhing tyranny. Aye, there are millions with warm hearts that dare to break oppression's chains or nobly die. And that was what really got him in trouble. So he could assault police officers, he could get into trouble, he could be a playboy running around Liverpool, but stand up against slavery and fight for the rights of dark-skinned people, you're in trouble. It reminds me of when I started writing raps as a young, angry man wanting to change the world. It was a song called Come the Revolution, but the lyrics go like this. Don't spend your time on earth without purpose. The addictive fiction of capitalism isn't worth it. My spirit's free in God so we can freestyle verses, but citizens will judge you by the products you purchase. Hypodermics turning children with a shot in the arm. Like pollution fools the hooligan, lost in the dark. They sing we shall never be slaves. Are you sure you aren't? Because a chain could be wages paying off our credit cards and overdrafts. Now even the homeless are hidden. Can you see the contradiction in the United Kingdom? Anonymous money's making unanimous decisions, stealing raw materials to feed your raw materialism. Listen, let me explain the enigma, because now the only thing we demonstrate is we're ignorant. So-called progress suppress the real predicament. I look at the sky to find it's all gone digital. Fat cats with whole facts to win the rat race, but you know they're still a rat, not some kind of saint. It's like they lost their soul at a decimal place. Mistaken acquaintances for their sons and theirs and graces, a word with a misunderstood usage, while a child has exploited a world away from which we live, apathetic to the truth of what our future is. Are you connected to the truth of what your future is? We've got a third world mentality in a first world state. We've got time on our hands, it leaves a blood red stain. Scott Heron told the truth about the home and the hate. Revolutionaries asking, can we spare some change? It's all fair game with no political thought. People get bought like the media get paid to distort. Scapegoat asylum seekers claim there's no justice. People want an opinion, but only online they'll discuss it. It's all globalized, both the good and the evil, so we have a choice to make because there is music inside us. The revolution has died. That's why I'm speaking in the 1 minute silence. So we have crossed the river, and here we are in Manchester, and we have made it to the fabled Poets' Corner. And you know what? You can tell it's Manchester because it has started raining. Happy days. So if you look out on the sort of bended elbow of Long Millgate where it curves round, if with your back to Chetham's Library, you can look out and you can see what is now the National Football Museum. But in front of that is a water feature with a bit of greenery behind it. And at the moment, it's not coping with the rain. So we have a water feature in Manchester that can't cope with rain. But where this water feature is where the Sun Inn would have been. And Sun Inn was also dubbed Poets' Corner because in the 1830s, 1840s, a group of poets met in the upper room of the Sun Inn. And there they would have poetry readings. And they drew tremendous crowds. Even though he found an adopted family here at Poets' Corner, there was still a sense of yearning for his childhood. He'd been in England since a boy, but still I think felt connection to his mother, felt connection to his sisters. No more does this sort of homesick feeling from Robert Rose come out in a wonderful poem called Home of My Childhood. Home of my childhood, thou art ever dear. O'er ocean's waves, sweet visions of thee come. Through the dark changes of each rolling year, I fondly turn to thee, my far-off home. At eve, I oft direct my gaze above, to the pure beauty of each vesper star. Thus dost thou shine my early home of love. Thou art my light, soft glimmering afar. My country, although wrapped in mental night, for knowledge o'er thee scarce its ray hath spread. Can I forget where first I hailed the light? Land of my birth, thy shores I long to tread. So the rain was getting a bit much at Poets Corner, so we've decided to get underneath the iron overhang. It's very ornate, this lovely Victorian design, Victoria Station. And looking across the road here at Poets Corner, I'm gutted that there's no commemoration, there's no memorial here to remind us that there was Poets Corner, the place where, right in the middle of the Victorian age, working class poets would assemble in front of a live audience to discuss ideas and to speak to not just this city, but to the nation. Reflecting on Robert Rose's outsiderness, the sense that he spent pretty much all of his life in England, but has this connection to a foreign place. It reminded me of my journey of feeling like an outsider in this great city of Manchester, which I definitely feel attached to, but at the same time, part of my identity is abroad. And on days like this, when you're in the middle of industrial Manchester, tall grey buildings looming over you, an overcast sky that seems to be spitting at you constantly, I can imagine Robert Rose reminiscing on his childhood. But it also reminds me of my heritage and my mom's heritage of being on an equatorial climate right by the sea. A few years ago, I wrote a tune for a wonderful group called Aria Astrobeat Orchestra. And it kind of reminds me of that. It's a track called Sankofa. I go on daydreams to escape these grey clouds that shroud mundane streets. Another Monday means another bill keeps coming until one day we trip to the motherland on African breakbeats. Love it when plans come together like the 18. Yes, some people's attitude is so frustrating. I say please and thank you. Walking down my avenue, but inhabitants looking rude like they want to mace me. Take me on a jet plane, please, to where Kelly Welly on the roadside is just a couple of Sadies. Ladies in Macola Market counting their takings. And Elmina Castle means the scars of our slavery, yeah. The colonials, they call it the Gold Coast. I'd rather call it Ghana, my home from home. Precious the way locals respect the old folks. I'm in the UK, even so my mind travels by Trotro. My soul knows deep, I gotta visit it soon. Start movers moving like Kwame and Nkrumah. Or distant relatives, will think I'm only a rumor. I need some palm nut soup and full food to consume. But the crowd's not so far when I listen to highlights. I'm at the coastline in no time in my mind's eye. I'm always celebrations, God is wonderful. And what we just want to do is home, cut to the root. They say Sankofa.
Take me to the place of the motherland. The people understand. Celebration.
Now we're going to head off to the Royal Exchange Theatre, Manchester. A place in Robert Rose's lifetime was known as the Exchange. It was kind of like the Wall Street of Manchester, the Cotton Exchange, which is a very interesting place, but also a place that was often used for parties as well, a place of music and dance. So you know what? As I bop up the road, I'm going to beatbox. Let's go. In we go. I'm walking into the Great Hall of the Royal Exchange Theatre, Manchester, which is an extraordinary building. You've got these massive pink marble Corinthian pillars going up to the ceiling with gold leaf at the top. You've got these three huge domes which are with coloured glass letting blue light in. And the most freaky thing about this building is the theatre space itself. It looks like a giant alien spacecraft has been left in the middle of this Victorian hall. You can hear the sounds of construction, and the stage carpenters are building new bits of set. Before this was a theatre, this was a cotton exchange. This is where stuff would be traded. Far across in front of me, on one of the far walls, you can still see market trading boards, which has got, New York and Paris and Liverpool, the prices of different things up there. And this would be a place very much known to Robert Rose. This is a former cotton exchange, a place which in all its grandeur was actually built on the blood of slaves. So in the daytimes it was known as the exchange, but at nights sometimes it would be used for balls. So there were fancy dress balls held here, and the great and the good would come and dance in a masquerade. We don't have evidence for sure to say that Robert Rose would have come to a ball in this place, but it's extremely likely. Here's a poem he wrote about a fancy dress ball in 1845. The Festival of Fancy by Robert Rose, the Bard of Colour. Diogenes is here, an honest man. He looks forlorn, hath be with himself began. A negro's hugging his vile chains in bliss. Ah, what would Wilberforce have said to this? Amazing sight. I, the monster Caliban, in white kid gloves, picks up a lady's fan. Socrates in a fool's cap, and wise Solon, so wise indeed he cannot point a colon. Alexander seems a coward, and some jelly is stuffing into his luxurious belly. O motley group, sailors who never saw a sea, and soldiers who never sword did draw. Still, in our daily walks, we love to ape what is beyond us. There's a dichotomy between what is presented and what's real. It's a masquerade ball, it's a fancy dress ball, so people are playing parts that are not real, and there's a sense that he really is an outsider, sort of watching the hypocrisy between how people present themselves to who they really are. And I wonder if he felt that himself. The last stanza talks about sailors who never went to sea, and soldiers who never drew a sword, and poets who never picked up a pen. Now, he could be describing the attendees of the ball, but he could also be describing himself. Has he achieved what he wanted to do? There's all this pressure on him as a poet, as a bard of colour, yet he never finished his masterwork. In the last few years of his life, his drinking got pretty serious, and he descended into alcoholism. And the newspapers at that time report that he went on this massive binge where he didn't sleep for 7 or 8 days and was drinking loads and loads of alcohol. All we know is that he wandered the streets of Salford in a stupor, shouting, "It's a comedy, it's all a comedy." And he ended up eventually being put in a prison cell and dying in police custody. It's a tragic end for a remarkable character, being one of the first famous people of colour in Manchester's history, someone who made an impact on the cultural life and on the lives of the poor in the city, and who strived to make a change and to speak truth to power. And that's a spark, that's a flame that I would like to pick up and carry. And that hope which is expressed in Robert Rose's work and writings, that's something which I take inspiration from today.
That was a new commission from award-winning theatre writer and MC Testament, walking from Salford to Manchester. And I'm Joe Fenn, speaking to you from the historic Portico Library in Manchester, home of Northern England's biggest literary award, the Portico Prize, a celebration of place and writing in the north of England. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, and tell your family and friends about it. The Portico Library is a registered charity. You can find out more about our work at www.theportico.org.uk. The Portico podcast is funded by Arts Council England. The producer is Nija Dalal Small. Concept and programming by Sarah Hill, with special thanks to Dr. David Cooper. Join us next time.